Thank you very much. So I want to talk to you today about TerraCycle and what we've done, but really to frame it in a key question, which is the question of what is waste. And before I go into how we look at waste, there was recently a little video that was produced on our company a few weeks ago that gives a really good sort of nutshell perspective over what we do, and I thought we'd start with that as a little bit of a background.
I was a freshman at Princeton, and I didn't really have any intention of starting a social business. But I dropped out of school 8 years ago because I just fell in love with the concept of garbage. Our major global solution for garbage, put it in a pile or burn it. These are not sophisticated solutions. And that's how TerraCycle came to be, to help eliminate the idea of waste by making things that are non-recyclable, recyclable. Can a plastic bag technically be recycled? 100%. Can a candy wrapper? 100%. And we do it. We're the biggest collector and processor of wrappers, chip bags, and other flexible packaging in the world. But you need a unique system because on its own, the economics don't work. Our collectors are the most vital aspect of our business. We have close to 26 million people sending us this waste. And that whole cost is funded by major consumer product companies, because they found that the public was craving a solution to their waste.
There's a potential new thing.
What is that?
Fire hose.
We were thinking of accessories.
Fire hose pothole.
Our team of scientists and our team of designers look at every type of waste stream and identify what are the solutions for each one, because really each type of garbage has a different heartbeat. Juice pouches become backpacks. Chip bags can melt into an injection moldable plastic. And with dirty diapers, the superabsorbent polymer ends up being used in the farming industry, so the soil has better water retention, and the plastic is made into something like a park bench. We have evaluated every consumer waste stream, and every type of garbage has a solution. Now, of course, if we stopped buying stuff, none of these problems would exist. We are on a consumption fix. Our grandparents, they had way less stuff. When you bought a table, you would buy it with an intention of having it passed down to your kids and their kids and so on. Then we went out of the Great Depression, we went into the biggest global war we have ever seen, and we wanted to rebound from that. The idea of consumption and the idea of disposable products solved the failure in the economy. I don't think TerraCycle would have succeeded 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but we're tapping into this desire that is so deep amongst everyone to do the right environmental thing. We're collecting millions of pieces of waste every day. And so while people are addicted to consumption, and so am I, we are willing to try to solve it. Every single object in this office is garbage. And it really is there to inspire people to feel like they can come up with anything and run with it. Maybe it won't work, maybe it will. Only putting it out there will allow us to know.
So just as a little bit of a, thank you. Thank you. So to give you a little sense of the story, you know, every company has a genesis. Our genesis actually started in a grow-up in Montreal. That's my friend and I, or my friend Moore, trying to grow marijuana plants in his basement. And we couldn't really make them work. It's, if you've ever done gardening in a hydroponic environment, it's not easy. But what solved it was worm castings or worm poop. Once they started using worm castings, the plants started growing really well. And I got really interested in this idea because it was worm castings take organic waste, which is a waste stream, and they make it into a really valuable fertilizer. We didn't invent this at all. What we did do is when we went back to school, we created a machine that would very, very quickly, this machine was our first one, this converts about 2,000 pounds of organic waste into 2,000 pounds of worm poop in a 7-day cycle. And so we were able to really think through how can we take one waste stream, in this case organic waste, and convert it very, very quickly. But we had a challenge. No one would invest in our business, and we couldn't even afford packaging to get the product out there. And so we've always come back to this question, the question of what really is waste, to think about how do we solve the very idea of what is waste. And I think if we look at it, as the video said, first, There's no such thing as garbage in nature. I think that goes without saying, but it's important because it defines waste as a man-made idea. It's not just a man-made idea, I would argue it's a very modern idea, probably, as you saw in the video, post-World War II, and it really has two constituents, two things that make garbage garbage. One is that we buy way more than we need, and the really guilty people are not the companies, it's us, by going out and voting for these things, by buying them every single time. If we stop buying a certain product, then that product would stop existing. That is the fundamental nature of marketing and consumer products. The other area, beyond us buying way more than we need, is that we make stuff out of really complex materials, things nature doesn't know what to do with, like plastic, like you heard in the prior talk. And if you add consumption and complex things together, you get the modern idea of garbage. Just from a sense of scale, it's 5 billion tons a year is the global garbage problem. 20% of that ends up in the Pacific Gyres. Now, there are some solutions. If you look at the system of waste today, some things can be recycled. But let's just step back and ask, why is an aluminum can recyclable? And why is a dirty diaper not recyclable? It's not the technical capacity, because we do recycle dirty diapers and we do recycle aluminum cans. The reason is economics. The cost of collecting an aluminum can and processing it into aluminum ore is less than the value of the aluminum ore, so you can actually make some money doing it. But the cost of collecting a dirty diaper and processing it into polypropylene, which is what a diaper is made from, is way more expensive than the value of that polypropylene, which means that you need a subsidy. And the challenge is that everything else falls into the non-recyclable category, which means we put it in the trash. What happens from there is in the Americas, North America, Latin America, and most countries, it ends up in a landfill, which is just a glorified pile. And then the other option is if you're in Europe, especially Germany or Western Europe, most of it is burned for energy. But either way, whether you prescribe to either of those solutions, they're one-way solutions. You can't burn twice, and you can't put in a landfill twice. And most of the environmental impact of the products we have, like my t-shirt, most of the impact on this t-shirt, assuming it's cotton, I think it is, was growing, turning soil into a plant, the plant into textile, the textile into a woven textile, and then making a t-shirt. It's the extraction of these raw materials. So what we first invented as our first product was looking at waste, and we decided why not package our worm poop in used soda bottles. This actually became the first product in the world, still is today, after a decade, which is quite sad, I have to say, where it's truly reusing soda bottles. You can buy this at Walmart, Target, wherever. What's funny about this, too, is there's the entire idea of the intellectual property of waste. We had to get licenses from Coca-Cola and Pepsi to package shit in their distinctive shape and sell it, which we did. But what's surprising to me is why aren't other people looking at reuse as a packaging idea? It's also the cheapest way to possibly package a liquid, as a side note. Anyway, we then, and it was a funny coincidence because it was born here at Lohas. I came and gave a talk here in 2007 when we were really just a worm poop company. And the guy coming up after has become a really close friend, Gary Hirschberg, who runs Stonyfield Yogurt. And after he gave his talk at Lohas, he came and asked me, well, it's really cool you're doing this with soda bottles, but what about yogurt cups? Yogurt cups are intensively not recyclable in America, very few zip codes except polypropylene. Can you help solve that? And it started a very big journey for TerraCycle to think through, can we do what was cool about this, which is using garbage to make a product, and can we apply that to any type of garbage? And if the answer to that is yes, then there's no such thing as garbage. We just have to collect it and process it. So we went to a bigger question. I just talked about garbage earlier, but we went one step deeper to really think through what makes something waste and what are the properties. And I would argue, let's just take any object. Let's take a yogurt cup, because we'll take the Gary example. What is a yogurt cup really made from? And I would say it's three things. One is the composition. It's made from plastic. In the case of yogurt cup, polystyrene or polypropylene. Then it's not just a bag of polypropylene, it's actually in the shape of a yogurt cup, which means it's also the function, the feature of what it is. You took the material and you put it into a function. But then it's one more thing. That yogurt cup wasn't made to grow a plant. It wasn't made to wear as a hat. It was made to hold yogurt, which means it also has an intention, and that's quite important. And what we found is that there's actually a hierarchy of waste. Basically, the worst thing to do with waste is send to a landfill, because you attribute no value to it. The next best is what our friends in Europe do, which is waste to energy, where at least you value the caloric value or the energy value of the waste. But then it's gone and turns into carbon, a little bit of energy, and ash. The next three are what we call cyclical solutions. Solutions that can be repeatedly done over and over, which is really where I think all waste should end up going. I'm going to start with the very best one, is reuse. Reuse is one way to define it, is that you value the materials, the features, and especially the intention. So that's an example of taking shoes and refurbishing them, or computers. Here's some examples. This is the idea with the soda bottles. We ended up flavoring it because turns out when you eat different food, you poop different poop, and worms do the same. So we invented tomato, orchid, African violet. This is a fun one. This was the best-selling bird feeder in America for 1 year in '07, which is just an upside-down soda bottle. So that's all reuse. Here's another example of reuse. This one was done with Unilever last year, where we looked at a butter tub. Butter tubs are exactly the same as planting pots, especially those dinky planting pots we buy in nurseries that you use once, you can't recycle. Last year, 35 million plants, just by putting a hole in the bottom, were packaged in old butter tubs, sold at Walmart, so in big distribution, and it allowed the ability to give a complete second life to something that was never intended to go into that position. Another example, this has nothing to do with TerraCycle. I wanted to put this in here because a friend of mine developed this in Central America, which is a bottle that has male and female parts, so you can click them together, and you can actually ship bottles now without ever having a box of any kind. It's probably the most efficient way to ship bottles, and if any of you make bottles, consider something like this, where you can click all your bottles together and give them another use. The next thing is upcycling. Upcycling we would define as valuing the materials and the features, but not the intention. Juice pouches were never intended to be a backpack, but frankly they make a really good backpack. They actually have more characteristics from durability than cotton does. But it was never intended to do that. That would be called upcycling. And there's an infinite number of ideas that you can do in upcycling, whether it's pet bags, whether it's toothbrushes, whether it's movie film. And I'm just going to show you a bunch of examples here so you can see that it's almost infinite in what can happen, all the way to a shower curtain. This is our Bare Naked Granola shower curtain. To speakers, to soccer balls, shoes, even dresses. That dress on the further side is made from 6,000 used peanut M&M wrappers. That's in the Museum of Modern Art. And the other one, I had to work really hard to get the material together for that one. But it wasn't all that difficult. Anything can be made, even our offices. This is an example of TerraCycle's office in Germany. You'll notice every aspect of the office is garbage, or in our office in Sao Paulo, in Brazil, or our headquarters in the US, everything can be made from waste, and that's all examples of upcycling. Now the challenge is if you're going to collect a lot of waste, not that many people necessarily want a backpack made from juice pouches with a logo on it, and moreover, even if they did, there's billions of juice pouches put out. If you put them all into backpacks, you'd still have to have all the backpack consumption in America and then some to use it all up. So the next answer is recycling. Recycling values the material that the waste is made from, but not the shape and not the intention. Here's an example of products that are made entirely from pet food bags. This is Mr. Potato Head, but what's funny about this one, it's entirely made from potato chip bags. So everything can either, and we've evaluated today, every single consumer-facing waste stream that exists, we're now focusing more on B2B waste streams as incremental ideas, and everything without exception can be either upcycled, either reused, upcycled, or recycled without any exception. Here's an example: juice pouches, upcycling and recycling, or flexible packaging, upcycling and recycling. Even companies have now started taking the waste we collect with them and putting it back into their products. This pen here may not seem like much, but it's the world's first pen made entirely from used pens. That's in the market today, as of 6 months ago, in the US and Canada. And there's many other examples you'll see. Next year we're releasing with one of the world's biggest cosmetic companies, the world's first cosmetic product made entirely from used cosmetic packaging, and so on. So what we thought about is, once Gary, after actually this Lohas talk, said, can you solve yogurt cups? Very quickly, actually, and two other friends came up on the scene. Seth, who runs Honest Tea, was launching juice pouches and asked the same question, can you launch juice pouches? And then Kit from Cliff Bar called, serendipitous, this is the weirdest thing, saying, can you solve energy bar wrappers? And we came up with this hierarchy, and we realized that yes, you can. But the bigger issue isn't actually solving it, it's getting it in the first place. Because any creative person, if I said we have 20 truckloads of toothbrushes, this group very quickly in 1-2 minutes would have solutions. The issue is, how do you get 20 truckloads of just toothbrushes? So we realized that to solve waste, you got to do it in 3 ways. You got to collect it first, then you got to do something with it, which is the solution, and the irony of business is you got to make it make business sense. So it actually has to have a promotion element to it as well, or the funding at some point will evaporate. So just to show you how this works, when we look at waste, we look at where waste occurs in a supply chain. If you're a major company, waste first occurs at the manufacturing level. To give you a sense, we work with Frito-Lay in 5 countries now collecting chip bags. We also happen to pick up 100% of their factory waste chip bags that come out from their printers and from their factories. And mind you, I'm picking a big company because they're typically the most efficient from an operational perspective. Yet still, 5% of annual production for a company like PepsiCo is pre-consumer waste. Now this exists whether you're Cliff Bar, Stonyfield, Honest Tea, whether you're the Eco, Lohas type company, or whether you're mainstream, it's still about the same percentage. What makes this percentage big is simply flavoring, marketing. If you stop flavoring your products, and if you stop creating special packaging, then that percentage goes down very, very quickly. But then the product ends up in a consumer's hand. Let's say it's a yogurt cup. They eat the yogurt. They're done with it. It becomes waste. And there's 2 solutions. So the question is really, how do you collect the post-consumer waste? And the way this works today in 22 countries around the world is you can go to the TerraCycle website. Here in the US, TerraCycle.com. And if you're other markets, just check your local TerraCycle website. And you'll be presented with a slew of waste streams. Here in America, 52 unique waste streams can now be collected. All things that were not recyclable before. You simply sign up. You can be an individual, a school, a church, an office. It doesn't matter. And you become a collection point. Let's say you're interested in collecting cosmetic waste. You just take a box, fill it up with, even though L'Oreal in this case finances that program, any brand of cosmetic waste can be put in the box. Once the box is full, say now you've collected 1,000 pieces of cosmetic waste, you go back to our website, download a free shipping label, send it to us, and then when we receive it, we typically give a symbolic donation of about 2 cents per piece of waste into your account, sort of like a bottle bill. That's the essence of the donation. And then you get to choose any school or charity in America or the country you collected to allocate the money to, and then we'll pay that out directly. And then you just repeat, and now you are a micro collection point for that type of waste. And you can go and add as many types of waste as you wish. This is today, as an example, in schools, running in 75% of all American schools. And what's interesting is you walk into some of these places and there's 50 boxes in a row. One for your flip-flops, one for your shoes, one for your pens, and so on. Because the more you segregate waste, the more value there is in the waste, and the easier it is to do high-end solutions. That's the fundamental answer. Now people will ask, well, this is all well and good and sounds great, but how big can this become? After Lohas, which was in 2007, one of the first programs we launched was our juice pouch program, first funded by Honest Tea, and then later Kraft Foods, which owns Capri Sun or manages Capri Sun here in the US, picked it up. In the first year of that program, we collected a very modest number, 22,000 pouches. Today, we collect 3% of all of American juice pouches, which is about 500,000 every single day. That's now getting quite significant. And what we also found is once we were able to show this to companies, most of the world, this is just a sampling of maybe about 1/3 of our partners, came on, joined in, and wanted to make their waste stream nationally recyclable. Not just in the US, because frankly, juice pouches are not recyclable anywhere in the world. The thing started going global. Today, we have offices, warehouses, collections in 22 markets. They're all the red dots on this map. And every blue dot is a market that's opening before this year is over, because these are global issues, the issue of non-recyclability. It is not a country-by-country question. Today, 30 million people are actively collecting, and I'd hope, if anything, you guys sign up and collect. It's free, you'll raise money, and save garbage from going to the landfill. Now the question again with scale comes, what is the overall plan of scale? Because you want to be able to get to as big a percentage of diversion as possible, ideally the same percentage that is being diverted today through recycling for soda bottles, which here in the US is give or take about 25%. So the way the economics of all this works is we charge the brands for the costs, which is the shipping, the donation, and the processing. Remember, non-recyclable waste is only non-recyclable because of the economics. That is the only reason. So you need to charge a subsidy to make that hedge work. And the challenge is when you start at the beginning, the costs are relatively high per unit. So we broke our program into 3 phases. First, we launch. We learn where the collections occur, how is it happening. Then we go into phase 2 where we start creating rules. We say, look, you only get a donation now if you send in maybe more than 500 pieces of garbage per box, because the bigger the shipment, the cheaper it is. And then we go into the mega side, which is to me the most exciting part. In developed countries, this is our developed country model. This is in the UK with Tassimo, which is a coffee capsule. We today divert 5% of all of the UK's coffee capsules. We found out after 24 months where are the big collection points. And so in those collection points, we're now dropping large containers so that we can really scale up the collection while not scaling up the cost. That's in developed markets. In developing markets, the game is totally different. There, in Brazil, in Argentina, in Mexico, in India, you have waste pickers, cartoneros, who live near landfills. I'm sure you know about this. And basically, they subsidize themselves. They make money by collecting recyclables and selling them to a recycling depot for the commodity value. So we simply go to a brand, like in this case, Tang in Brazil, and say, hey, why don't we create a market for Tang with cooperatives? So now we go to them and say, hey, we'll buy juice pouches for one real per kilo, whatever the price is, and then suddenly a market is established, and then millions of waste pickers now have another incremental object they can collect and make more money on. What we also found is the system works in about any type of waste you can imagine. My three favorite ones, I love nasty, crazy waste streams. And this is, the first one's probably the most interesting. In Brazil, at the end of this year, with Cadbury, we launched the world's first national program to collect and recycle used chewing gum. We can now actually injection mold chewing gum at 35% into plastic, and it smells a little minty actually when you're done. In the US, late this year, we launched the world's first national program to collect dirty diapers, both from elderly care facilities, because that's about half of the world's diaper consumption, and also from nurseries, which is the other half, babies. That'll go live here in the US end of this year, and in Europe early next year. This is maybe the most controversial of all of them, is we just launched 3 weeks ago the world's first national program with Big Tobacco in Canada, where we partnered with the world's biggest, or the biggest Canadian tobacco company, to collect and recycle cigarette butts and all other cigarette-related waste streams. So it's interesting that you can have a company like TerraCycle that is so hyper green, actually working with probably one of the most evil businesses that exists, Big Tobacco, but solve a major issue. There's 3 trillion butts that end up in the water every single year that we throw out. And what was amazing is after the success in Canada, they're now, by the next 12 months, 20 countries will be collecting cigarette butts around the world. So what we end up finding is that through, thank you. Don't smoke though. Or if you do, send me the butts. So what happens is through what I would call an extended voluntary product responsibility program, brands can make their waste nationally recyclable. Instead of it going to the waste, it can end up going in a positive way. And what's also really neat is that this ends up creating big sales benefits for the brands. I'm going to show you one last example. I remember I showed you the Capri Sun example. That's their collections. Here's their sales. Whoops. My PowerPoint quit, so I'm not going to show that to you, but I will tell you about it. Capri Sun, when we launched with them in 2007, had 61% market share, and they were doing $1 billion a year in sales. That was when the program launched. 5 years later, they're doing $1.5 billion in sales, and they took all of that sales away from Minute Maid, which ended up declining market share at the exact same rate. So what happened is the total aggregate amount of juice pouch consumption didn't change in America. What changed is that it seems like consumers who valued the fact that now Capri Sun, instead of putting in money into "I taste good, buy me" commercials, put their money into, hey, we're going to make our waste recyclable. People preferred a company doing that instead of a company doing the normal thing. And they just moved the sales the other way. And that was really interesting, because then you have a proposition to go to the brands and say, this makes business sense. Forget whether you care about recycling or not, it makes business sense. But isn't it great that instead of putting your money in these commercials that are just encouraging consumption, you're putting your money acknowledging you have a big problem and then solving your big problem. So I want to thank you for listening, and especially for being here, because this whole business model evolution, taking TerraCycle from being a worm poop company to a company that is making the non-recyclable recyclable in real mega scale on a global platform, actually started right here at Lohas in 2007. So thank you very much.